All right, hello there. This is Joe Johnson from Cancer Dudes Live More, and today I am lucky to be talking with Chris Wark, who is a survivor of colon cancer. He acquired colon cancer when he was 26 years old and eventually recovered from it using nutrition and natural therapies. All kinds of great stuff that I'm really passionate about, so I'm really excited to hear what lessons Chris has in store for us today. So Chris, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm happy to have you.
Thanks, Joe. And I'm always excited to share my story. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, definitely. So, can you kind of tell us a little bit what that was like when you were 26 years old, you first got diagnosed with colon cancer? That's not something that many 26-year-olds have to go through.
Yeah, it's pretty rare. It's rare, but it's becoming less rare.
Mm.
The reason is cancer's on the rise.
Mm-hmm.
Young adult cancer's on the rise. I mean, pretty much across the board, cancer is on the rise.
Mm-hmm.
And but I was diagnosed in 2003, and at that time it was super, super rare for anyone in their 20s to have colon cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's 9 years later, and it's actually becoming more and more common. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason is my generation and the generations that follow mine are the fast food generation.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up eating fast food. Now, as a kid, I wasn't eating as much fast food. My mom was pretty health conscious, but once you're about 13, you start feeding yourself, and you make your own decisions about what you're going to eat. And
Right.
and even our parents really had no idea what was changing in the food industry.
Mm-hmm.
And our parents grew up eating wholesome, whole foods.
Mm-hmm.
Healthy, whole foods. Typically, eggs, milk, meat, vegetables, just your basics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some grains. But the food industry's changed so much, now they're adding all these artificial processed chemicals to food. Artificial flavors, colors, additives, preservatives. And so food has changed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of changed under our noses and no one realized it. And so that's a big part of why, in my opinion, why cancer is on the rise.
Mm-hmm.
100 years ago, the average cancer rate was about 1 in 30 people. And today, it's 1 in 2 males,
Mm-hmm.
1 in 3 females who are predicted to get cancer in their lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
So what's changed, right? Our food habits have changed. Our dietary habits have changed. The environmental toxin exposure has changed a lot. So there's a lot more man-made chemical toxins in our environment
Mm-hmm.
today than there were 100 years ago. And our stress level is through the roof in all, civilized nations. We're all working harder. We're all stressed. There's all this news media, we're being bombarded with constantly. It's all bad news and scary news and stressful information.
Mm-hmm.
So, diet, stress, and environmental toxins. And, the fourth factor would be your lifestyle choices, like whether or not you exercise, whether or not you have bad habits like smoking, drinking, partying,
Mm-hmm.
drug use, etc. So, anyway, having said all that, yeah, I was diagnosed at 26. I was having abdominal pain for many months, and I put it off because I thought I had an ulcer. And when the pain finally got worse and worse, and eventually I went to the doctor, and they thought it was an ulcer, and they gave me ulcer medicine. It didn't help, and then eventually they referred me to a gastroenterologist, and they did a colonoscopy, and they found a golf ball-sized tumor. They biopsied the tumor. They said I had colon cancer. They said, we've got to get you in surgery right away because, we've got to get this thing out of your body before it spreads.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I didn't know anything about, cancer, and I was like, okay, I guess that's what I have to do. So I had surgery. They took out the tumor. They took out a third of my large intestine. They found some cancerous lymph nodes, which they removed. And they said, look, you're stage 3 because it spread to your lymph nodes. And the next step is going to be 6 to 9 months of chemotherapy. Now, what I didn't realize then that I know now is, this whole cancer staging, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, it's really, all cancer is a systemic metabolic disease. If you have cancer, it's all over your body.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? there are cancer cells all over your body. Now, they may only be able to find one tumor where they have congregated, right? But those cells are present in your entire body. In fact, cancer is a very natural and normal thing. Everyone has cancer cells in their body, and the immune system is designed to identify and eliminate cancerous cells, among other things. So cancer is not really something you have to be afraid of. It is natural and it's normal. But if you have a tumor, that means there's a breakdown in your immune function. Okay? And what leads to a breakdown in immune function? Poor diet, environmental toxins, lack of exercise, and stress. Kind of like I said before. So the real problem, it's not cancer. Cancer is not the real problem. Basically, you're not sick because you have cancer. You have cancer because you're sick. Cancer is a symptom of a bigger problem, of a sick body, and of basically a poorly functioning immune system, and maybe a serious nutritional deficiency in your body. Of course, I didn't know any of that when I was 26. Okay, but there were a couple things that happened that I really thank God for. They were very serendipitous events in my life, and the first thing that happened was when I was in the hospital. Well, first of all, it was sort of divinely orchestrated. The surgeon that I ended up using was like the best in Memphis, and he was not the original surgeon I was supposed to go to. The original surgeon I was supposed to go to forgot to call me, believe it or not. And my dad had mentioned it to someone that he worked with, and this woman that he worked with was friends with another gastroenterologist and said, well, hey, go see this guy. So I got a second opinion, and then he referred me to this other surgeon. So that was really cool. But when I was in the hospital, after they took out a third of my large intestine, the first meal they served me was a sloppy Joe in the hospital. And it's a story I tell every time I tell my story. But it's a sloppy Joe. It's like just awful junk food, and it's like mystery meat and some kind of sauce and like hamburger bun. And even at that time, when they brought me, I hadn't eaten in 2 or 3 days, and I was really hungry. And of course, they brought me this meal, and I was just like, really, this seems so unhealthy. It seems like I should be eating something better than this, vegetable soup or something. And I think anybody can recognize the difference between health food and junk food.
Right.
And I ate a little bit of it, and I couldn't even finish it. It wasn't good. And then when I was checking out of the hospital, the surgeon, who I admire greatly and clearly did a great job on my surgery, but I asked him about diet, and I said, are there any foods I should eat or avoid? And he said, no, just don't lift anything heavier than a beer. That's what he said. So, again, that's not, I get it, he was making a joke and trying to, whatever. But I was serious. Like, I really wanted to know, and it told me that he didn't think it mattered.
Right.
That diet and lifestyle don't matter. When we know they do. There are countless studies about diet and lifestyle and how they impact the body and how they lead to disease. But for some reason, in the medical community, they just don't talk about it. They're not trained on nutrition. It's an elective in medical school. And it's just not a part of conventional medicine, which is so messed up. And so those, that kind of started me thinking, like, wait a minute, it kind of started my distrust in conventional medicine. The fact that they thought it was a good idea to give me a sloppy Joe in the hospital. This is a place for healing, and they're giving people sloppy Joes. I don't know. It's like crappiest cafeteria food you can imagine.
Right.
And they're giving this to sick people. And then, of course, this digestive surgeon had no opinion on nutrition to help me. So I'm thinking, okay, this is weird. This doesn't make sense. Well, they told me I needed 6 to 9 months of chemotherapy. That was the next step. And I went home. My wife and I, after I kind of sobered up off the pain meds, and I was just kind of thinking about my life and what was going to happen to me, and was I going to live or die, or just I didn't even know. And but I had this sort of growing uncertainty and concern about chemotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
And it just didn't make sense. And the more I thought about it, I just thought, gosh, it's poison. I don't want to poison myself. I don't want poison in my body. The idea of poisoning my way back to health, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
I don't get it. You know what I mean? And it's not like I need to go to med school and have a degree to understand. But like surgery, I understand that, right? There's a tumor. It's a bunch of cancer cells. We need to take it out of you. Okay, that makes sense.
Right.
But now we're going to put poison, literally, that would make a healthy person sick.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to put that into your body. You're already sick. So I didn't feel good about it. But I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know. It's like, I really didn't like that idea, but I didn't know what other options I had.
Right.
So my wife and I, we prayed, and I was just like, God, if there's another way, besides chemotherapy, just show us, just please,
mm-hmm.
Show me the way. And, excuse me, 2 days later, I got a book that was mailed to me that arrived on my doorstep from a man in Alaska
mm-hmm.
who knew my dad. And I've never met this guy, but he's a friend of my dad. He's a business acquaintance of my dad's, and he had, he was basically had the nerve, for lack of a better word, to send me this book, which is pretty controversial. That book was called God's Way to Ultimate Health.
Mm-hmm.
And so God's Way to Ultimate Health was written by a man who, as it turns out, had colon cancer and about 30-some-odd years ago. And he watched his mother die of colon cancer. She went through all the conventional therapies and suffered and died. And he thought, well, heck, if I would get cancer, I'm never doing that. Well, he ended up with cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And he found out about juicing and raw foods.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he did. He converted to a diet that was basically raw vegan diet, and drank tons of vegetable juice, carrot juice. And so I started reading this guy's book, and I'm like, man, this is it. This is an answer to prayer. This is exactly what I asked for.
Mm-hmm.
I asked for it. Here it is.
Right.
This is my alternative. So immediately, I was like, I'm doing it. This is, throw out all the junk food. Let's go buy some organic fruits and vegetables. And I just converted to a raw vegan diet right there.
Mm-hmm.
And started drinking 8 glasses of vegetable juice a day. It was mostly carrot juice, but I did like carrot, beet, cucumber or celery.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit of ginger root. And so, I just went for it. Full blast.
Mm-hmm.
And I told my wife and my family members, and my mom and dad were supportive of me, but my wife's side of the family were kind of freaked out and thought it was crazy. And my wife did too. She didn't. She grew up. Their family grew up in a very conventional, traditional view of medicine.
Right.
And mine was. My mom had always kind of been into alternative health and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, to me, it wasn't that weird.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also operating from a very, my foundational belief system. This fit right in with my foundational beliefs. And that is that the earth was created by God for us.
Mm-hmm.
And that everything we need comes from the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, at the core of my being, my belief system, that's it right there. That's where it all starts for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, if that's true, if God created the earth for us and we didn't just evolve, then He put everything on the earth that we need. And that it doesn't have to come from a pharmaceutical company
mm-hmm.
or from a factory to nourish our body. It can just come straight from the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Straight off a tree, straight out of the ground. And even eating animals. So So again, when I read this guy's testimony in his book about overdosing on nutrition, basically eating tons and tons of raw fruits and vegetables, and he was making the case that the reason that we're all sick is because we're starving for nutrition, because we're putting all this junk food in our body that processed food, factory food, has very low nutritional value, if any. And on top of that, it's full of artificial ingredients. So it's like a 1-2 punch on your body. You're starving for nutrients, and your body's trying to deal with all these weird chemicals that you're putting in it that it was never meant to ingest. I said it earlier, but artificial flavors, colors, preservatives, additives, like just weird stuff like texture enhancers to make breads fluffier and cookies soft batch or whatever. You know what I mean? And so there's all these just unbelievably strange chemical food additives that are being put in food today. So I'm just like, man, this makes sense. Chemo and poison does not make sense. But natural food from the earth, overdosing on nutrition, I love it. I love that idea. It makes total sense. That's what I'm going to do. And I had some family members that really were, basically like, please just go see the oncologist. Just hear what he has to say. Will you just at least do that? And so I was like, okay, yeah, I'll go. Maybe, they're like, well, maybe there's, you haven't even heard what they have to say. Those kind of things. So I went and saw the oncologist, and my wife and I were sitting in the waiting room at this cancer clinic, and it's packed, and it's a big place, too. Big clinic, and it's full. And we're sitting on the couch, and the TV's on. It's like it's on one of the morning shows. I think it was the Today Show or, one of those Good Morning America or something. But anyway, Jack LaLanne comes out. He happens to be the guest that morning. He comes out, and he's in his little, he's like 90 years old or whatever, and he's just fit as he can be, and he starts going off about nutrition and the reason that we're sick because we're eating all this processed food, and we need to start eating food from the earth and juicing, and that's what supports health in the body. And he said, if man made it, don't eat it. And I looked at my wife and I'm like, this is crazy, I think I said, like, can you believe this is on right now? And she was like, yeah, it's kind of weird. And so that was another sign for me. It was just confirmation that I was on the right track, And we went in and talked to the oncologist, and I asked him if there were any alternative therapies available. He said, no, there are none. If you don't do chemotherapy, you're insane. He told me I had a 60% chance of living 5 years, which, I'm sitting there going, this is like a coin toss, It's like, basically, like, those are not great odds. If that's the best, chance you can give me with your therapies, I think I'll try my luck, over here with what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Not that I believe in luck, but you understand this expression. So I asked him about the raw food diet, because I was already on it, been on it for, right around 2 weeks. And he said, no, you can't do that. It'll fight the chemo. And I was thinking at the time, I was like, there's no way I'm stopping this. There's no way I'm going to stop doing what I'm doing right now. And, but, they don't want you to do raw foods because a raw food diet is a very aggressive detoxification diet and a healing diet. And it works against the chemo because your body will kick the chemotherapy out, quick. Like, it'll just spit it out. And they don't want your body to kick it out. They want it to hang around and linger and, do all this damage that it's supposed to do and do all this cancer cell killing and whatever. Also, when you're taking chemotherapy, it destroys your immune system. And so what happens is you become very vulnerable to infection from otherwise harmless bacteria, like would be on a raw piece of fruit, like an apple. So they don't want you to eat anything raw. Everything you eat has to be cooked. And the problem with cooking is cooking can really destroy a lot of the nutritional value in food. And there's a place for cooked food. But anyway, so everything he told me was like, it was just confirming, it was just more confirmation that I was doing the right thing. Plus he was a jerk on top of that. So I'm like, oh, this is you're making it easy for me.
Right.
But at the same time, it really scared me. They use fear in the cancer industry. They use fear to motivate you to take action. Mm-hmm. And it's the fear of dying. Mm-hmm. If you don't do this immediately, you're going to die. Mm-hmm. Right? And it's either surgery or chemo or radiation or all the above. You know what I mean? And so they basically just want to get you on the conveyor belt before you have time to think, before you know what's happening to you. Mm-hmm. And once you're on it, it's very hard to get off. Mm-hmm. And because there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure to do chemotherapy, to follow the prescribed path. It's like, there's your family members, your friends, the doctors. They're all saying like, no, you have to do chemo. You have to. No, alternative therapies don't work. If there was something better, they'd know about it. They'd be using it. If there was something better, we'd be using it. Mm-hmm. And that's the most popular response. Alternative therapies don't work. Or you'll hear somebody say, oh, I know somebody that tried alternative therapies and it didn't work. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. Alternative therapies, and I don't even like to use the word alternative therapy, because that could mean anything. I prefer nutrition and natural therapies, especially non-toxic natural therapies. Right. But that's what I did. But the reason all of that stuff gets a bad rap, and usually it's alternative therapies that people are talking about, is because most people don't try them until it's too late. Mm-hmm. They've already been cut, poisoned, and burned. Mm-hmm. To the point where the doctors have said, well, we've done everything we can do, and you're terminal, and we can't help you anymore, and they send you home to die. Mm-hmm. And that's when people wake up, and they're like, I don't want to die. They can't help me anymore. I got to do something else. What else is out there? You know what I mean? But by that time, unfortunately for many people, not all, but for many people that are in that situation where they're stage 4 and they've just been brutalized, it's too late. There is a point of no return in conventional cancer therapy where you cannot heal. Mm-hmm. You've just crossed over, and it's just you're on the decline. I mean, it's just you're dying, and you can't come back. But if for anybody watching this, I don't want to scare anybody, because there is always hope. Because I've met stage 4 cancer patients that have gone through all those treatments that have healed themselves and recovered. Mm-hmm. So it's absolutely possible. Yep. So I don't want anybody to watch this and think like, oh no, you have to try. You can't give up on life. Right. So, but anyway, the point is that stage 4. Well, that's why alternative therapies get a bad rap. Right. Because most people don't even try them until it's too late. And on top of that, what does alternative therapy even mean? Mm-hmm. I mean, look at Steve Jobs, for example. The media had a field day with the fact that he used alternative therapies. But if you really search, and I've done it, you cannot find any information about what he did. Mm-hmm. Nobody knows what he did. Right. Literally. I mean, they're just not out there. I'd love to see it. I'd love to read it. I'd love to know what he did. And he was terminal anyway. I mean, he was pancreatic cancer. It's not curable, according to conventional medicine. Right. By the way, I know a guy who cured himself of pancreatic cancer. Right. Naturally. But anyway, I mean, that's just a perfect example. Well, it didn't work for Steve Jobs. Alternative therapies don't work. If, it would have worked for Steve Jobs, he was, a billionaire and all this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, we all have to make our own choices in life. And we have no idea what choices Steve Jobs made. No idea. Mm-hmm. I have no idea what he did. Right. And if you use the same logic that people would use when they're talking about Steve Jobs and alternative therapies, if you apply that same logic to chemotherapy, why would you ever do chemotherapy? How many tens of thousands, if not, no, I'm sorry, hundreds of thousands of people have died after going through chemotherapy. Mm-hmm. Right? Right. Same logic. Well, it didn't work for them. Why would you do it? Right. The reality is it works for very few people. Most people that go through conventional cancer treatments do not live. A few do. Those, in my opinion, are miracles. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you go through, those brutal treatments and you live and the cancer doesn't return, that's a miracle. Mm-hmm. What I did, not a miracle.
Right.
What I did was I supported my body's ability to heal, which is a natural and normal process. Now, I'm very thankful to God because He led me in the path of healing. I completely want to give credit where credit's due, okay? But, again, to me, the human body itself is a miracle.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But the fact that my body healed of cancer is not a miracle. It's natural. So anyway, there's a few other things I've learned about chemotherapy since then that they just don't tell you, right? They don't tell you. They basically tell you, well, you're going to feel bad. You're going to get sick. You're going to lose your hair. You're going to lose your appetite. And that's about the extent of it.
Yeah.
And the reality of chemotherapy is it is unbelievably destructive. It poisons every cell in your body. It causes permanent damage. And there's a lot of different chemo drugs. So I'm going to lump them all into one category just for the sake of time. But chemotherapy drugs have a myriad of side effects that include brain damage, lung damage, heart damage, hearing loss, kidney damage, loss of bladder function, so you have to wear a diaper, neuropathy, which means it destroys the nerves in your hands and feet, and I have a family member that can't use their hands anymore. She literally cannot turn a knob, cannot open a drawer or a cabinet or feed herself because of chemotherapy. Chemotherapy causes more cancer in the body. It makes existing cancer stem cells more aggressive. It causes secondary cancers, that's new cancers in the body, because most chemotherapy drugs are even identified by the U.S. toxicology as carcinogenic. So many chemo drugs are cancer-causing chemicals. There are very specific protocols for the nurses and the people that administer the drugs for them to follow according to OSHA, which is, occupational safety hazard standards. And OSHA requires that they wear these gloves up to their arms, and they wear these, protective gowns to protect their face and all this stuff because they don't want to get it on their skin because they know it can cause cancer. But they're going to put it in your veins and they're putting it in your body. But they're worried that they're going to get it on their skin, which is worse. So, it really, the more you just read and learn, and this is not conspiracy theory stuff, this is published, peer-reviewed studies, this is the information that is published by the pharmaceutical industry, by the U.S. government. This is, it's not some wacky, crazy theory I have. This is just real information. So, I have a website, chrisbeatcancer.com. I haven't plugged it yet. I guess I should. But, I've got tons of this kind of information on my site. It's all about nutrition and natural therapies, and it's also about this kind of stuff about chemo and radiation that people need to know. So, of course, radiation causes cancer. So chemotherapy, it destroys your immune system. Your immune system is the most important part of your body, really. That's what keeps you alive. It's what keeps you well. And if you destroy your immune system, then all of a sudden you're subject to more cancer, to life-threatening infections, to you name it. And my opinion was, I want to build my immune system up. There's something wrong. I'm sick. My immune system's not working. I want to build it. I don't want to tear it down anymore. And so, all these pieces just started falling into place for me that really solidified my confidence and the opinion of my approach, my opinion that I was making the best decision for me. And so I basically just stuck with it. I never went back to see that oncologist again. I found a doctor of natural medicine in Memphis, a clinical nutritionist, and a guy that was who specialized in natural medicine. He was a master herbalist and just lots of experience. And so I worked with him, and he introduced me to an integrative oncologist that I was able to work with, who did vitamin C IVs for me and did check my blood work once a month. Had a couple CAT scans along the way. Didn't really know any better at the time. I wouldn't do them now, but because of the radiation level. But for some people, if they really, they just really, really need to know, if what they're doing is working. The CAT scan is one way to find out.
Mm-hmm.
There are other ways, like the Navarro urine test is very, very popular way to test if you have cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about 98% effective,
Mm-hmm.
Navarro urine test. So, anyway, this doctor of natural medicine had me on a lot of different supplements. He modified my diet, and basically I was raw vegan for 90 days.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like phase 1. I did several juice fasts during that period for 7 to 10 days at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And then after 90 days, he was looking at my urine and my saliva and my stool and my hair analysis and blood work. And he was basically like, look, we need to get some more animal protein in your body.
Mm-hmm.
You need animal protein.
Yeah.
And, I felt fine. And I didn't think, I was prepared to be vegan the rest of my life,
Mm-hmm.
raw vegan the rest of my life. But what I kind of realized, and I've learned more and more over time, is that the raw vegan diet is an incredibly powerful detox diet and healing diet.
Right.
But at some point, you have to rebuild.
Yep.
And for me, my body type especially, now there are people, there's a few people out there that have been long-term raw vegans and they're thriving and, they're a picture of health and all that, and that's great.
Right.
And so there are examples that, yes, for some people can thrive on a diet
Mm-hmm.
like that. But for me, I really wasn't thriving. I was doing okay.
Yeah.
I felt great and I had lots of energy and all that. But I was very, very skinny.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't able to gain weight. And I lost all this weight, not only from the cancer, but then the surgery and then, juice fasting. And, so I just couldn't get back to normal weight and I didn't look good,
Mm-hmm.
I just looked like a skeleton. So he added some cooked food back into my diet and some clean animal proteins,
Mm-hmm.
like organic, grass-fed animal protein.
Right.
Beef, chicken, lamb, wild-caught Alaskan salmon.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, it was about 70 to 80% raw fruits and vegetables
Mm-hmm.
on a daily basis. And then at night, I would have some meat and some cooked, brown rice, quinoa, cooked
Mm-hmm.
vegetables, very simple.
Right.
But I drank 8 glasses of vegetable juice every day.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't stop. I ate giant salads for lunch and dinner every day. But what I did was I put all the cancer-fighting vegetables in a bowl
Mm-hmm.
and ate them.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a post on my site. It's called the Top 10 Anti-Cancer Vegetables.
Right.
And there's this amazing study. And by the way, this is not. People have been saying this for years and years and years.
Exactly.
There's this really amazing clinical study, published, peer-reviewed study. I think it came out in the Journal of Nutrition or something. But anyway, it's on my site.
Mm-hmm.
But they juiced all these vegetables, and they dripped vegetable juice on cancer cells
Mm-hmm.
in a lab.
Mm-hmm.
And they studied 8 different tumor cell lines, and it was like breast cancer, prostate cancer, colon cancer, I think brain cancer, and some others. Kidney, I think. Anyway, but they found just amazing things. They found that garlic completely stopped cancer growth
Mm-hmm.
and reversed it. They found it was number 1 against all cancers, except for one cancer. I think it was kidney cancer. The leeks were number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Garlic was number 2.
Yeah.
But anyway, garlic and leeks are unbelievably powerful. And then yellow and green onions. And then the cruciferous family of
Mm-hmm.
vegetables, which is broccoli, cauliflower, kale, Brussels sprouts, red cabbage, early
Mm-hmm.
cabbage.
Mm-hmm.
All of those were super powerful against cancer cells. And then, and so the allium family is garlic and onions and leeks.
Mm-hmm.
And the cruciferous family is what I just said,
Mm-hmm.
broccoli and cauliflower and kale. And then there were a couple others that were in the top 10, beetroot, beets,
Mm-hmm.
and spinach. And so, guess what? All that stuff was in my salad every day. It was like amazing. I'm reading this today. I'm like, yeah, it makes so much sense. That's what I was eating.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, it's just neat to see, when science validates all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's really awesome.
Right.
And people think, it's funny because there's every year, every month, there's a big push to raise money for some cancer. 1 month it's prostate cancer, the next
Right.
month it's breast cancer,
Right.
and then it's lung. It's just on and on. It's just all year round. These charity organizations are trying to raise money for
Right.
cancer
Right.
research. the reality is we don't need any more research.
Mm-hmm.
The research is done. The journal, there's actually a medical journal called Nutrition and Cancer, and it's been published since 1979.
Mm-hmm.
They've been researching this stuff for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
They have all this amazing research. It's just ignored.
Right.
So we don't need any more research.
Right.
The reason they want to do research is because the pharmaceutical companies want to find a new drug they can patent and sell.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole point of that research.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not it helps at all, doesn't matter. The big lie is that, the cure is right around the corner. With your help, we'll be one step closer to the cure.
Right.
And they're not interested in curing cancer. They're interested in patenting a new drug they can treat cancer with and make billions of dollars in cancer treatment.
Mm-hmm.
But a cure would put them out of business.
Mm-hmm.
If one company cured cancer, the others would go out of business.
Right.
At least their cancer drug department would shut down. But there's so many drugs. I mean, there's 150 chemo drugs, and then on top of that, then you've got all these anti-nausea drugs and all these like complementary, secondary, whatever, tertiary drugs that they're going to put you on along with chemo to try to minimize the side effects and this, that, or try to boost your immune system back up. I mean, it's crazy.
Right.
The average cancer patient is worth about $300,000, more than that, really, in revenue to the industry.
Mm-hmm.
That's from surgery, chemo, radiation, blood work, CAT scans, PET scans, all that stuff.
Right.
So, it's an industry. They're not interested in changing the way they do things.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a very successful, very profitable model to treat cancer.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a model to cure cancer. Fortunately, some people do live and come out on the other side cancer-free.
Mm-hmm.
For most of them, it's only short-term. It comes back.
Right.
But for a few, they do stay cancer-free long-term. And hey, that's great. That's great.
Right.
But I think it's just important. Part of my message is just sharing the truth with people.
Right.
Because no one is thinking about, the average person is not thinking about the way things work in the cancer treatment industry. They're thinking about, normal stuff. Like what's on TV tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Like what are my friends doing right now?
Right.
So, and then when they get hit with the cancer diagnosis, they have no information. It's like they're naked. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They have no information. They have no ammunition to draw from, and they just believe whatever they're told.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm just trying to share my story that nutrition is powerful.
Right.
Nutrition supports the body's ability to heal.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're sick, there's a very good chance that it's because you're nutritionally deficient, that your body is starving for nutrients it has for a long time, and that maybe you haven't been taking care of yourself. And maybe you're stressed to the max because stress leads to cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, stress leads to cancer, and then a cancer diagnosis is like a stress bomb.
Right.
Worry and fear and anxiety, all those things, they suppress your immune system. They raise your stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, and they promote inflammation in the body, and they suppress your immune system. So, man, stress is a big factor, and when it's something that I really try to help people with because negative emotions, and I bet you do too.
Yep.
Negative emotions will make you sick. Unforgiveness, fear, hatred, envy, jealousy, even insecurity and like hating yourself, and guilt and not forgiving yourself, like all that negativity, and of course like worry and anxiety, and if you're obsessed with the news and what's happening in the world, and terrorist attacks and all this stuff, all that stuff, all that stress, and work stress too. All of those things, the loss of a loved one, bad relationships, they all will break you down over time if you don't learn to forgive people and let go of things that you're stressed about and stop worrying. And for me, it's trusting God. When I have a problem, I'm just like, you know what? I'm not going to worry about this. I trust God with it. I'm going to give it to you. In prayer, I'm like, God, it's yours. Take care of it. I trust you, and I'm not going to worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't, because you can't worry about things that you can't control.
Right.
It doesn't help.
Right.
You when you're in a situation, you figure out what you can do about it, and you do that, and everything else you can't worry about.
Right.
So, and it's just like with healing, it's the same way. I did everything I could find and afford. I radically changed my diet and lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
I was just super health guy. I started exercising, moving my body, like just doing everything that I knew could promote health and healing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest was up to God. I was very dependent on Him to lead me in the path of healing.
Right.
So it worked out pretty good.
It worked out all right.
Yeah. Here I am. It's 9 years later,
Mm-hmm.
in the best shape of my life. I'm the strongest I've ever been. I've got 2 beautiful little girls that I would not have been able to have if I had chemotherapy. I'd be sterile.
Right.
Not that I couldn't adopt. Adoption's a wonderful thing.
Right.
But, another one of the reasons I didn't mention earlier that I really didn't like the idea of chemotherapy was I want to have children.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of my life plan. I was already married, but I was I want to have children. Heck, I want to have grandchildren.
Right.
And I want to live a long time. And to me, chemotherapy seemed like a short-term solution to a long-term problem.
Mm-hmm.
And something else I didn't mention earlier, but this is typically what happens with chemotherapy is chemotherapy will definitely shrink a tumor. It will kill some cancer cells. It will shrink a tumor.
Mm-hmm.
So will radiation.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem, along with all those side effects and destroying your immune system, is, again, it's usually temporary.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is the cancer comes back stronger and worse and in more parts of your body.
Right.
Because of, what I said earlier in our little talk here. It destroys your immune system and it causes more cancer. And so, you know people with cancer, and I know you understand how the process, but it's the same story every time, pretty much. It's, somebody gets cancer, they do the treatments, then the doctor at some point says, the cancer's gone, and, they're like, yay! And, a few months later, they have a follow-up scan, 6 months later, and the cancer's back, and then it's more treatments, and then it's either one or two things. Either they can't get rid of it, or it's gone again for a little while, and then it comes back even worse than the second time, and it's just this downward spiral. And I hate to see it happen, but it's so predictable.
Right.
I can just say, I can tell anybody with cancer, if you go down that road, this is more than likely the way it's going to go.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, now, a big message from me to cancer survivors, or people that are diagnosed, is that they have options.
Yeah.
That's my mission. Is I just want people to know you have options. You have way more options than you know about, than you've been told. But you have to do some hard work.
Mm-hmm.
The hard work is you have to take responsibility for your health. You got to read some books. You got to learn and educate yourself and learn about nutrition and how to heal the body and how to take care of yourself. And you have to make hard decisions and be disciplined and not, you got to stop eating burgers and pizza and Hot Pockets and, drinking big gulps.
Right.
Whatever, giant Starbucks and all that stuff. Because, again, it's not helping you.
Right.
Everything that you do has to be, with one goal in mind. This is helping my body heal. Everything you put in your body has to be something that will help it heal. And eventually you can loosen up. In my opinion, it takes about a year or two to rebuild your body. They know it scientifically. Every cell in your body regenerates, within about a year and a half. You built an entirely new body with the food that you eat.
Right.
And so it's easy to get rid of cancer in the short term with a diet change. In fact, a lot of people have remarkable results, immediately. But it can still come back if you don't make long-term changes and stay healthy and keep taking care of yourself and really, really rebuild your body.
Right.
And your immune system. And so, for me, it took a little over a year for my white blood cell count to get back to normal. Because because it was very low.
Yeah.
You know, my white blood count right after like surgery and when I was just kind of starting my little quest to heal myself, it was extremely low.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was like it wasn't even working. You know, and which is again that made sense because I had cancer. You know, like if your immune system is suppressed, your body's not producing enough white blood cells. Well, they can't keep up.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, again, it took about a little over a year for that just to get normalized in my body, although I felt great the whole time and, you know, and all that. So it takes some, you know, a radical change, and you got to have the will to live.
Right.
But you have to, you know, once you make a plan, you have to stick with the plan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You cannot deviate.
Mm-hmm.
You got to stay with it until you're, you know, several years in the clear. And then, yeah, then you can go out and enjoy, you know, an ice cream cone or have some pizza with friends or, you know, have a burger or something. But, again, it can't be part of your normal routine.
Right.
You know? Those are what I call recreational foods.
Mm-hmm.
You know? They're
right.
recreational foods.
Right.
Not meant to be eaten on a daily basis.
Exactly. For every meal.
Yeah. Every meal, you know. I mean, so... but once you get your health back, then it's just, you put it all in perspective. You know, it's like what I'm eating, I kind of live by the 80-20 rule now,
mm-hmm.
which is 80% of what I eat every day, really weekly, is super healthy,
mm-hmm.
raw food, like
mm-hmm.
no compromises.
Mm-hmm.
And then occasionally I'll, you know, we'll go out to dinner and we'll go whatever, and I'll have dessert, or I'll do, you know, I'll enjoy some not healthy food,
mm-hmm.
right? Because it's what you're doing 80% of the time that matters.
Right.
That makes the most difference in your, you know, health.
Mm-hmm.
The other 20% doesn't matter. But the problem is, in the Western diet, it's flip-flop.
Right.
You know, most people, 80% of what they're eating is total garbage.
Right.
And the 20% is like marginally healthy.
Right,
if
right.
that. And so you gotta, you know.
Gotta flip it back, yeah.
that
mm-hmm.
ratio back around.
Right.
So, you know, for an average person watching this that doesn't have cancer, that's what they need to do. It's like you need to be hardcore 80% of your food, of your meals, need to be super healthy meals, and then you can have some cheat meals or whatever you want to call them,
mm-hmm.
you know, on the weekend or something like that. You know, Friday and Saturday night, you go out and eat whatever you want. You know, that is not going to cause problems in your body. It's what you're doing day in, day out, every morning for breakfast, every morning for lunch, and for dinner, and what you're eating in between.
Mm-hmm.
That is what's either promoting health in your body or promoting disease.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, you dig your grave with your teeth, man.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right, and it's so I'm so grateful that you're spreading that message about how important nutrition is, because that's something that I'm definitely trying to bring to people as well. That's, you know, just such a crucial thing to be getting unprocessed foods and the high quality meats and the vegetables that you mentioned and all of that stuff and making that a majority of your diet. That is so important.
It is, and nutrition is hard.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's hard. You have to be, you know, you really have to have the will to live, to be able to give up. People are so food addicted,
mm-hmm.
you know. They're addicted to meat. They think there's no way I could live without meat, you know. They're addicted to milk. Oh, how could I never eat cheese again?
Mm-hmm.
Or how could I, you know, not drink milk or
mm-hmm.
eat ice cream? Oh, I can't even imagine a world where I wouldn't be able to eat cheese,
mm-hmm.
you know, or coffee, or just junk food, like
mm-hmm.
chips and comfort food and junk food and all that kind of stuff. And so that's really where the will to live comes into play, because what I've found is that, you know, having the will to live really has two components. First, you have to take responsibility for your health.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you just have to blame yourself. You say, you know what? This is probably my fault. And if it is my fault, then guess what? I can change.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I created this problem, I can fix it.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And if I'm sick because I was not taking care of myself, then if I start taking care of myself, then guess what? Maybe I'll get better. Real simple idea. So that's the first step, is taking responsibility for your health. But the second part of the will to live is you have to be determined to do whatever it takes.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, some people who are diagnosed with cancer don't have the will to live. And I know you may have encountered some people like this
mm-hmm.
in cancer coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and I have, for whatever reason, cancer diagnosis may be a relief to them. Maybe they're depressed. Maybe they're not happy with the way their life turned out.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they like the attention they're getting from being sick. Or now all of a sudden everyone's like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? And they're calling them and they're sending them messages and stopping by the house and making them food and, you know, babying them and taking care of them. And some people really like that attention.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they just realize, oh wow, I love all this attention. And you know, they're not going to say it. They're not going to say it consciously, but it's a subconscious thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's happening, and also you can tell if someone doesn't have the will to live if they're not willing to make any, you know, significant changes in their life.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the lung cancer patient who won't stop smoking.
Mm-hmm.
You can't help somebody like that.
Right.
You just can't.
Right.
You know, or you know, somebody again they won't change their diet, or maybe you try to share some information with them like, hey, you know, and people do this all the time with me because people will say, you know, hey, I sent my friend to your site. My friend has cancer, and can I send him to your site? And I'm like, yes, dude, please, you know, and they won't even go to my site. They won't look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, they'll give him a book or they'll give him a video or something, and they won't even look at it.
Right.
They don't want to know.
Right.
And it's unfortunate, but that's just, you know, a certain percentage of people, I don't know how many, but they just don't have the will to live, and they're very difficult to help.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they'll kind of put their head in the sand and hope for the best and kind of do what the doctor says.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not even that. And, and so you can't help those people. You know. A person that, and unfortunately I'm contacted a lot by someone that's trying to help someone else.
Mm-hmm.
My mom has cancer, my
Mm-hmm.
friend,
Mm-hmm.
my dad, my brother, and, you know, and can you help them? And the first thing I always say is, you know, they need to be the seeker of information.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to be the one contacting me.
Right.
Because you can't help someone through proxy.
Right.
It doesn't work.
Right.
You know? Now, if that cancer patient's determined to live, you can be an amazing ally for them.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Anyone can. I mean, being their advocate and their ally and supporting them and bringing them information and stuff, and if they're just sucking it in, oh, that's the best thing in the world. Because when you got conventional therapies, you're kind of on your own.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was like a lone wolf.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Everybody thought I was crazy, but, you know, my parents and then this doctor of natural medicine who was the first person to ever tell me I was doing the right thing. But other than that, that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't have a support group, and the alternative cancer community in Memphis didn't exist in 2004, that's for sure. And I really never really found anything online at the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for me, it was like I was just reading books and praying and just doing my thing every day, just sticking to the plan.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I met a few people that had healed their cancer naturally, and they were very encouraging. But again, it's just having that support system is huge. So anybody watching this, yes, if you can help somebody, you've got to try to help somebody.
Yeah.
If they have cancer, you've got to try to get them information about nutrition, natural therapies, and information that will kind of open their eyes that, hey, your body can heal. One of the biggest lies in the cancer treatment world is that the body can't heal itself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that only patented, you know, pharmaceutical drugs and surgical procedures and radiation therapy can heal cancer. It's just not true. And it's funny because they have a term for it. They call it spontaneous remission.
Mm-hmm.
That's healing.
Right.
Right? That means the body healed.
Right.
But they won't call it healing. They
Mm-hmm.
call it spontaneous remission.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what happened. The body healed, right? Well, we don't know what happened.
Right.
Well, define healing. What is healing then?
Right.
It was there yesterday. It's gone
Now
today.
it's gone.
The body healed it. So, I mean, it's unbelievably frustrating
Mm-hmm.
to get people to even acknowledge that healing is possible. But the way that the cancer industry looks at cancer, and things are changing now. I mean, there are some oncologists, a handful, that have left the conventional treatment world and are treating using nutrition, natural therapies, and integrative therapies, and all kinds of stuff. And the view, and I love reading what those guys have to say because they're amazing. Like Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez, Dr. Thomas Lodi, Dr. James Forsythe. But, their view is very different. Their view is the body can heal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you've got to support its ability to heal. Just kind of stuff I'm saying. But also, it's that cancer is not linear. And this idea that cancer is linear is just false.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by linear is that once it starts, it's unstoppable. You know, that there's only one course for cancer, and that's for it to get worse.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the lie that they use to convince people to jump into surgery and chemo and radiation so quickly. Is that you've got cancer, it's like an unstoppable train. You know, we have to, like, blow up the tracks. You know what I mean? But the reality is, no, your body can heal it. It's not linear. It doesn't just go cancer or getting worse, and then you die.
Right.
You know, without some just crazy intervention. It's just, yes, you've got cancer, you're sick, there's a problem. You know, that's all true.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to pretend like you don't. But your body can still heal it. We need to figure out what's going on in the big picture of your body.
Right.
Like, why do you have cancer? Not
right.
How do we get the cancer out?
Right. Definitely.
And so those guys, I mean, integrative oncologists, they're looking at the whole body. They're treating the whole body.
Mm-hmm.
They're not just cutting off a tumor. They're not just trying to poison cancer cells.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to support health and healing in the whole body.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that. That's what I am all about.
Definitely. That's what I'm about too. And I'm so grateful to you for all this information you've shared. The time has just flown by here. I could keep talking for hours, I think, but we should probably
probably. Too, man, once I get started, I can talk for hours and hours. You know, that's just the tip of the iceberg. But
that's right.
Everybody watching this, you know, if this resonates with you, if it makes sense, and you're like, man, this guy makes sense. You know, you can go to chrisbeatcancer.com. Mm-hmm. There's tons of blog posts and articles and research studies and like just really good stuff that will get you excited about the options that you have. You know, and there's a lot of other natural survivor stories on there. It's not just about me. You know, I'm trying to share the big picture, which is that I'm not lucky. You know, I'm not just some anecdotal lucky guy who, you know, somehow had spontaneous remission or whatever. Right? I'm here today because I made very deliberate choices and took very deliberate, massive action to support healing in my body. Mm-hmm. And if I can do it, you can do it.
Definitely. That's a great message. I think we're going to leave everybody with that. And again, Chris, thank you so much for being on. I might have to have you on again. We got so much more we could talk about here.
Oh, yeah, man. I could talk for hours. But, Joe, thank you. I mean, I really appreciate what you're doing. It's great to connect with somebody that's doing the same thing, that's promoting health and healing and sharing information, trying to help people. And, I mean, man, you just keep on running. Keep on doing what you're doing. We're changing lives. You know?
That's right. That's right. Awesome. Well, for all the guys out there, definitely go check out chrisbeatcancer.com. It's an awesome website. Lots of great information on there. I love it. I love reading it myself. So go check that out, and hopefully we'll have Chris on again soon. Thanks again, Chris, and it's great talking with you.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it, man.